So, autoimmune disease is when the immune system mistakenly attacks a part of the body.
We're talking about rheumatoid arthritis, psoriasis, type 1 diabetes, Graves' disease.
You can find joy with autoimmunity.
What are your thoughts in general about emotional health and autoimmune conditions?
Don't make your body do more work than it has to.
I think it's potentially very dangerous to the psyche of Black women
I'll just share two quick techniques.
because people's lives are at stake based on how we represent that information.
I built
Mhm.
two 300-hour months back to back.
Wow.
No symptom. But then a couple weeks later,
Everyone is talking about it. Is our emotional health the cause of autoimmune diseases? We're going to let you know what the studies are actually saying. With our special guests, we will overview autoimmune conditions, the prevalence, and possible reasons why the numbers are rising. And we will leave you with techniques that you can use to thrive while experiencing an autoimmune condition. And don't forget, at the very end, you will find out what one word can absolutely change your life. We thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to do what? Click subscribe. So one of the things that we know is that autoimmune conditions are very common. And in recent years, there has been a rise in autoimmune conditions that have not been explained solely by the increased screening or diagnostic abilities of clinicians. So one of the theories currently is that our emotional health may in fact be the cause of autoimmune conditions. Is that the case? Is it the fact that we internalize and we're peacemakers, we're people pleasers, or we're less likely to express our emotions, the underlying cause of autoimmune conditions? Well, I will tell you this. A lot of the recent publications, posts, or recent social media posts have implied that there is perhaps a causation between autoimmune diseases and stress, or in general, our emotional health. Is that true? Are we overreaching in some of these conclusions? Well, we're going to talk about that today. We're so excited to have AmiCietta Clarke back with us. As you guys know, she is the health coach extraordinaire. She is a huge advocate, but also a thriver with Myasthenia Gravis. In her daytime, she is an international lawyer. And on her spare time, which I'm trying to figure out how she found spare time to do this, but we're so excited that she is on her way to publishing her first book entitled Own Your Health, Healing, and Happiness. I love that title because that's basically what we're going to talk about today. So, AmiCietta, I'm so excited to have you back. You, like I said, you have this health coach thing down pack. And if I were going to have this conversation about emotional health and autoimmune conditions, you were literally the first person that came to mind. Let's talk about it. So there's been lots going on in the social and the media. A lot of people are talking about autoimmune conditions because there was a study that came out about a year ago that seems to imply that women are more likely to have autoimmune conditions simply because we're more likely to internalize our emotions because we're caretakers, because we're people pleasers, because we're peacemakers. And there was also an extrapolation that, in particular, Black women are more likely to have this silent rage, right? And because of this silent rage, we're also more likely to disproportionately be affected by certain autoimmune conditions, of which lupus is probably one of the most commonly known condition that disproportionately affects Black women.
Women have 80% of autoimmune disease in this society. So that diseases where the immune system attacks the body happens to women much more than to men. Things like rheumatoid arthritis, systemic lupus, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, inflammatory diseases of the gut, and so on. Why? They tended to suppress healthy anger. So they tend to be very, very nice and peacemakers. And they tended to believe that they're responsible if other people feel, and that they must never disappoint anybody. Two fatal beliefs. So these are the people that, according to my observation, but according to a whole lot of research as well, that I didn't even know about, but have since found, elegant research, these are the people that tend to develop autoimmune disease. Now, in this society, which gender is more acculturated, programmed to suppress their healthy anger, to be the peacemakers, to be the caregivers? Women. This is a function of a reality that a lot of people deny, but it's a patriarchal society, which we can talk about, but it's not a conspiracy. It's just how it works. So me in my marriage expect my wife to absorb my stresses. And if I'm unhappy, guess who I blame? And who do I take it out on?
So, what are your thoughts in general about emotional health and autoimmune conditions?
Sure. Thanks, Dr. Moore. I'm really excited to be back here. So I definitely think that there is an association. As you said, I am, a lawyer. I've had myasthenia gravis when I was working crazy hours as a lawyer, working 80 to 100-hour weeks. And I didn't make that connection. So I definitely think that there is a connection. But like you said, I've been looking at the research as well. And it's not clear that there's actually a causation. Definitely believe that stress, emotional health can impact the disease, exacerbate the disease if we're not managing our stress in a healthy manner. But I'm with you. We'll see as more and more research comes out whether it actually does cause it. And I do think autoimmune conditions are very complex, and the complexities more than I do. Just to say that because people are people pleasers, that can cause autoimmunity. I'm not sure if it's that clear cut.
Don't I wish it was that clear cut? Because then we can fix that, right?
Yeah.
Some people may be not quite understanding exactly what autoimmune conditions are. You've been in this fight for a long time. Can you share with us just in general what are autoimmune conditions?
Sure. So autoimmune disease is when the immune system mistakenly attacks a part of the body. So with myasthenia gravis, it's the immune system is mistakenly attacking the muscle nerve connection, the neurotransmitter receptors, the acetylcholine receptors. And there are other diseases, like you mentioned, lupus, where the immune system is attacking different organs. Um, Multiple sclerosis, but it's basically the immune system incorrectly attacking a part of the body.
Yes, and for someone like myself, in my case, having an autoimmune thyroiditis as a result of the immune system attacking the thyroid, it's really very pronounced the amount of, or just the disproportionate percentage of women who are affected by autoimmune conditions. It's said that somewhere between 4 out of 5 affected by autoimmune conditions. And in fact, the actual prevalence of autoimmune conditions or autoimmune diseases isn't quite known. This seemed to be a struggle with uh, trying to hone into the actual percentage. But the Mayo Clinic tried to do an estimate by looking at electronic medical record data. And they published in the Journal of Clinical Investigation that they estimated that in the US, it's somewhere around 15 million people have either one or more out of 105 autoimmune conditions. And that equates to about 4.6% of our population, which is a pretty significant portion, especially considering the total population of America. I think the latest numbers was somewhere over 330 million people. 34%, which I thought was pretty alarming, had more than one autoimmune conditions. And the breakdown in terms of male and female was about 63% female and about 37% male. 65% of those who were included in a study had one condition, and they broke it down to those who had 2, 3, and 4 or more conditions. So it's really interesting. And then Stanford at one point estimated about 24 to 50 million people are affected by autoimmune conditions. There was a study that came out a publication that came out in 2022 that said worldwide the incidence is probably closer to 19.1% and the prevalence closer to 12.5%. So all in all, what this says, whether or not we know exactly the prevalence of autoimmune diseases, we know for sure that it impacts a significant portion of our population worldwide. And what's really alarming is the increase in the number of people, or prevalence, I should say, of autoimmune diseases. Now, some people have questioned whether or not this is as a result of um, just the fact that we are better at detecting autoimmune conditions. Do you think that overall society is more informed when it comes to autoimmune diseases?
I think people are a little bit more informed now, but maybe it's just because of the circles that I'm in. When I was diagnosed in 2003, I didn't know what an autoimmune disease was, and I didn't know what an autoimmune disease was even after I got diagnosed. I mean, I knew something was wrong. I knew I was on medication. I knew I had the symptoms, but I didn't actually understand what was happening in my body. And I think that's something that I really encourage people, anyone who has a chronic illness, to really understand how the disease works in your body, because being informed will help you in your own care and your wellness, to, thrive. I do think we're talking about emotional health, but there are other factors as well. I mean, there are a lot of environmental factors. There's food. I think that there are a lot of things that play when it comes to the increase. I mean, it also could be. I think that doctors are a little bit more informed now in terms of, thinking it might be a autoimmune disease. I've heard I got a diagnosis pretty quickly, but that's just because one of my cousins who's a doctor told me what she thought it was. But I think that, doctors, just talking to people in these circles, that doctors are like trying to investigate autoimmunity at the outset a little bit more quickly than I think they were 20 years ago.
That's so true. I definitely think it's definitely much more at the forefront when it comes to differential diagnoses, especially in women who present with conditions that seem to be not explained by sort of your routine or more common conditions. And so I do think that we are a little bit better at diagnosing at least the more common ones. When we talk about the more common autoimmune conditions, we're talking about rheumatoid arthritis, psoriasis, type 1 diabetes, Graves' disease, and autoimmune thyroiditis, like myself.
So I've had rheumatoid arthritis since I was 7, or at least that's when it was diagnosed. Pretty much around high school, I started to have a pain that it became just such a constant. Waking up because not an alarm clock or the sun or whatever, but waking up because you're in so much pain that it's actually interrupting your sleep. And that became my normal. You know, when you grow up with any kind of chronic condition, you have this sense of like perseverance that's just ingrained in you and that you have no choice but to really get good at. It wasn't until my second Broadway show when I was starring as Roxy Hart in Chicago and dancing Fosse, which is all very specific and very demanding physically. That's when my rheumatologist was like, girl, like it's time. And he said words that changed my life. He said, why don't you think you deserve to feel better? And so finally making that decision to get serious and to find a surgeon and to get the surgery was actually really liberating. I think my message to the kids would be that nobody gets to place the limits except you. I think we grow up in this environment of people telling us what we cannot do. I'm so grateful that I was exposed to the foundation, that I went to JA camps and I didn't feel alone, that I met some of my best friends still to this day because we just spoke the same language. We understood, we had the same shared experiences, that we didn't have to explain ourselves or explain, oh, I'm taking a pill right now. Those aren't the typical conversations that 12-year-olds are having. But when you realize that you're not alone and you are empowered and that you get to be the one calling the shots, that's very exciting.
I don't know if we're as good as detecting the less common autoimmune conditions or considering them because their presentations tend to be a lot less familiar. But it's really important for us to be mindful of these conditions given how prevalent they are. Now, when you think about autoimmune conditions and mental health, have you found that there is any type of association at minimum between someone's mental health? And when I say that, I mean definitely there have been studies. I think Harvard published something in 2000. Yeah, they published a study in 2020 where they looked at individuals or followed individuals who had a stress related disorder, meaning not just a stress moment, but actually had an event that produced a significant amount of stress. And they followed them out and found that they were more likely to develop autoimmune conditions. They were also more likely to develop multiple autoimmune conditions, and they were more likely to be diagnosed at an earlier age. But even outside of that, when we talk about mood disorders, depression, anxiety, have you found that there is any type of association between just even your routine mental health disorders?
But yeah, there was a study talking about the increased prevalence of autoimmunity and PTS, and people who have experienced a traumatic event, and so following that traumatic event, but there was an increase in autoimmunity. Now, I believe the study also it was a correlation, so looking at everyone who people in the study who had experienced it and their incidence of autoimmunity versus people who had not experienced it and their incidence of autoimmunity. But I definitely think that can play a role. I
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think every disease there's a sort of a cocktail sometimes of things that come together to lead to that diagnosis. So, I mean, sometimes it could be just one thing, but I think there are a number of different things. So I was trying to think to myself, whether there was a traumatic event. I think, there are other like medical things that could have led to my diagnosis. But definitely I do think that there's an association. And then of course there's an association when it comes to once someone has an autoimmune disease and whether it would be exacerbated. I will give you an example
Mm-hmm.
from my life when I was working as a lawyer, working crazy hours. I didn't really make that connection because I was on medication, and most of the time the disease was controlled. I mean, of course, sometimes it wasn't. I had to take different um, additional medications, but I worked when lawyers are working at big law firms, they have to bill their time. So if you go to the bathroom, you take personal phone calls, you eat lunch, that's not billable. So I billed two 300-hour months. So that's, 75 hours a week, not including all those things, the personal time. I billed
Mm-hmm.
two 300-hour months back to back.
Wow.
No symptoms. So I was like, oh yeah, I'm good. I'm taking my medication. Didn't have an effect. I'm just like everybody else. But then a couple weeks later, it popped up. And, my doctor was telling me sometimes you have that delayed reaction to the stress. And, a lesson I learned from that for anyone who has autoimmune disease and is just pushing themselves because they're on medication, they think they can just keep going. I learned that we can't out medicate our lifestyle. Like
Right.
just because you're taking medication, you can't just push yourself and not take care of yourself because you're on these medications. Like you still have the disease. Like it's going to show up at some point.
Right. That's so very true. And I think it's a very complicated relationship when it comes to autoimmune diseases and stress. And simply because, as you mentioned, stress can definitely be one of the triggers. As we talk about they have identified a particular RNA molecule that then leads to changes in our genetics that then potentially can lead to these autoimmune diseases. Well, there are certain factors that actually affect whether certain genes get turned on and off. And stress is one of those factors. So it's very foreseeable that stress has an important role with the onset of autoimmune conditions. And also in some individuals, especially those who have autoimmune conditions where pain is a symptom, or severe weakness is a symptom, you can definitely see how that experience can then also lead to an increase in the stress of the disease. And so you have this back and forth relationship between stress and the disease itself. And so, to your point, that's why it's really important to make an effort to break that cycle, so that you can continue to control and stabilize your condition. There is also studies that have shown that there is that there are increased rates of anxiety and depression as well. And as you can imagine, someone who may have some type of disabling effect as a result of their autoimmune disease is more likely to have symptoms of depression and anxiety as a result of trying to navigate life living with an autoimmune condition. So there's definitely a strong relationship between that. Now, wanted to a population that is very dear to my heart that I do want to climb into a little bit more, dive a little bit deeper is the Black woman experience. And one of the studies that came out, people started to talk about this silent rage, meaning that Black women are more likely to internalize our emotions and our health is being impacted by that, leading to the prevalence of conditions like autoimmune diseases.
I'm going to say this. Once I found out that autoimmune diseases come from suppression of our feelings, I'm justified in my anger and I'm justified in releasing my anger. I will not be sick because I'm being polite. I don't want people to see me blow up. I'm trying to remain calm, be the one that takes the high road. For me, righteous anger has gotten us everywhere. Righteous anger has gotten us every damn where. The reason why we are where we are in the history of our time is because of anger. Is because of injustice. And I get to speak up on how I've been harmed. And the reason why I speak up about it is because I've been told to shut up. I've been told to not deal with it. I've been told to not focus on negativity. And I believe, truly and wholeheartedly, it was the reason for my depression. Being upset, being sad, and not dealing with those angry feelings and not dealing with those sad feelings and just having to live my life and carry on made me sick. And I refuse to be sick for anybody. And I'm not going to shut up about it. I'm not. And it's just a reminder that I will never, ever be treated that way again. And I will be vigilant about it, unrelenting about it. And when boundaries are crossed, I'm going to speak up. You can work out and run and stretch, do yoga, Pilates, but also release your anger, release your sadness, release your frustration, say it out loud. Do not hold back. Happy Saturday.
When you hear about that, as a Black woman living in the United States of America, what are some of the thoughts that come to your mind?
Well, I mean, I think I definitely don't like that term, like, silent rage, right? Because, people are always talking about the angry Black woman, and I just don't like that, portrayal of us, right? I mean, there's so many stressors that we have, and then, you're adding that label as well. But I do think that there is something to that we a lot of times we're carrying the family. We have a lot of responsibilities. We're taking care of everybody else and putting our needs on the back burner. and that's definitely not good. It's not healthy emotionally. I don't think it can manifest itself in different ways physically that aren't good. So, I definitely think that there's something to that. We do need to try to prioritize ourselves. Like we can't
Hmm.
pour from an empty cup. So we have
Right.
to fill ourselves up before dealing with everyone else. And I'm, speaking to myself here as well.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, I think there's definitely something to it, but
Hmm.
as we were, discussing off camera, it's not to blame Black women for developing, autoimmunity, right?
Right.
I mean,
Yes. And okay.
yeah, no, I mean, they're like everyone's dealing with different
Hmm.
life circumstances,
Right.
Black women and other folks, right? So, I mean, that type of thing. I mean, it's one thing if you're saying, you know, there are certain foods you should be eating, you're not eating that. I mean, and even if people are not eating certain foods, I mean,
Hmm.
I don't want to, kind of get into that whole blame game, especially when it comes to this.
Right. I'm listen, y'all said I need to express my emotions. I'm gonna express my emotions. I definitely agree with you that the narrative, we have to be so very careful with the narrative, right? Because you have the experience of a Black woman in the United States, especially, which is one that has been primarily an experience of survival. And so, as a result of that, having to survive in the boardroom, having to survive in the classroom, having to survive on every aspect of life, and we have this conflicting expectation where there's this narrative that we have this silent rage, but then we also have the stereotype of being the angry Black woman. So you don't want us to express ourselves because otherwise we are going to be labeled as the angry Black woman. But when we don't express ourselves, now you're saying that that's playing a role in our health and that we are potentially causing harm to our health and increasing the prevalence of some of these disorders like autoimmune diseases. So it's just for the narrative of it, well, one, because the studies have not shown a causation. So I think just even explaining the relationship of studies and how studies are done, and then having people sort of express or represent their opinion of these studies and other studies like them by emphasizing and perpetuating these narratives, I think is potentially very dangerous to the psyche of Black women. And I think it's very important for us to be very careful when we interpret these studies for the general public to be responsible in representing what the studies have said and what they don't say. And while these studies have definitely shown a significant correlation between our mental health, our emotional health, and the outcomes. For example, there was one study that was published in the Journal of Racial Ethnicity Health Disparities that looked at vicarious racism and the prevalence of lupus. And it definitely did show that there may be a relationship or correlation between vicarious racism or experiencing vicarious racism and heightening the disease activity of patients who are affected by lupus. So there strong data out there that says that there is a correlation between our emotional health and these conditions? Absolutely. Have they confirmed that there is a causation between them? No, they haven't. And matter of fact, a lot of these studies can't say much more. I mentioned the study that the Harvard study that they looked at stress related disorders. That was an observational study, which means you can't conclude anything more than I observed that this group of people had a higher rate of this particular outcome. So,
Right.
while I do think that there is a need for us to be more mindful of our emotional health and our mental health, I think there's a certain responsibility that America has to take on and say, hey, America has caused Black women to have to internalize their emotional health. America has caused Black women to have conditions that are as a result of their need to survive by internalizing their emotions, because America has not made it welcoming for Black women to express their anger, their disgust, their disappointment, their sadness. It has not been a safe place for Black women. So I think when we are describing these studies, we need to put it into context that it's not just Black women deciding not to be expressive, but that we haven't had a choice but to internalize and but to be silent. And we're not always in rage. Sometimes we're just making a point. Sometimes we're just being assertive. But that assertion is just
Right.
interpreted and viewed very differently. So I definitely think that there is an opportunity and a need to really change the narrative of what we're saying when we are sharing, especially as medical professionals, as advocates in this space, as people who are affected by these disorders, to really say what the studies are saying and what the studies are not saying, because people's lives are at stake based on how we represent that information.
Yeah, no, I think that that's a great point. I really like how you're making that distinction because I have seen s- videos on social media where there's Black women themselves blaming other Black women for having autoimmune diseases. So, like, I like how you're making that
And
distinction
blaming
that,
themselves.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, we need to definitely anyone who has an autoimmune disease, you have to give yourself grace. So like you
right.
definitely can't start blaming yourself. Like there's too much already going on
Say
for
that
you.
again.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
And
Yeah, yeah. I was talking about with the disease, but there's too much going on in general right now.
right, right, right. I got where you I got where you and I was co-signing what you where you were going with that. I was
Yeah.
co-signing that. So what are some practical ways that you have been able to sort of manage and live and in fact thrive with myasthenia gravis? Like what are some takeaways that you can share with other women like myself who are out there who are affected by these diseases and want to thrive just like you're thriving?
Yeah, sure. So I think in terms of emotional health, there are two aspects to it, right? So it's reactive, like how do you react to a stressor? And then there's what I call building your base so that you become less reactive over time. So in terms of reacting, there are a couple techniques that I employ. One is breathing techniques, right? So when you have a stressor, there's something going on with the disease, like the doctors told you, giving you a bad prognosis, or something that you have a flare going on, something with family, with work, engaging in some box breathing will help. So I'll just share two quick techniques. One technique I like to do is called box breathing. So you would pick a breath count. So let's say it's 3 breaths. I'm going to draw a box. You breathe in because you breathe in for 3 seconds, right? You hold for 3 seconds. You breathe out for 3 seconds and you hold for 3 seconds. So those are the sides of the box. It's the inhale, the exhale, the hold, and the hold, right? And the whole idea there is that while you're thinking about, okay, what am I doing, right? So now you're not thinking about the stressor. And then you're also activating your body's parasympathetic nervous system, which is your rest and relaxation response instead of your sympathetic nervous system, which is your fight or flight response, where your heart rate's increasing, your breathing, you have extra cortisol and everything. So that's one technique. There's also 4-7-8 breathing, where and so this is a technique that comes from pranayama yoga, but it's been popularized by Dr. Andrew Weil, who is a renowned integrative medicine physician. And there have been some studies that show that 4-7-8 breathing is very effective for anxiety. So we've talked about, anxiety, where you breathe in through your nose for 4 seconds. You hold, like I can walk you through it. I don't know if we have time to do that, but like you breathe in for 4 seconds, you
I'm
hold.
literally doing it.
Oh, okay. Should I walk you through it?
I was also doing the box breathing.
Oh, you're doing the box breathing too. Okay. Well, 4-7-8 breathing, you don't want to do it too much because then you might fall asleep in this whole second. You'll be like, oh, we're gonna go because it relaxes you so much, right? So you breathe in for 4, you hold for 7, and you breathe out through your mouth for 8. And I would recommend doing 4 rounds of that. And that just really relaxes you. You're going through a stressor. Just do a couple rounds of 4-7-8 breathing. It's gonna just whole shift your whole, um, your mental state.
I love
And then
that.
also, yeah, yeah, no, it's great. And then also another thing is depending on where you are and what just happened, just kind of getting fresh air can help, right? So just going outside for a little bit. Now, in terms of building like your base so you become less reactive. Oh, actually, another technique is EFT, which is tapping, which is a combination. I'm not sure if you're familiar with EFT, but is a combination of acupressure and saying, and positive psychology. So, I don't think I have enough time to really explain EFT, but anyone who wants to look it up, EFT or tapping is very good for stress. It's also good for pain, right? So, but in terms of building your base, getting sleep, right? Sleep, and if anyone who has an autoimmune disease, you want to definitely get as much sleep as you can, right? Like, well, I can't tell you exactly how much sleep to get, but you need to get the sleep that your body needs.
Mm-hmm.
Then one thing I like to do also is like visualization, like visualizing yourself well. So that,
Mm-hmm.
you know, really get into a state like what would you do? Where would you be? How would you feel? Like, think about that and then, write it down. Then also to the extent you can exercise, because depending on autoimmunity, autoimmune disease you have, it might be more difficult. And it depends on if you're going through a flare or not. But if you're not exercise to the extent that you can without overtaxing yourself, there's there's even something called, I think, adaptive yoga. So you could do yoga. It's for yoga for people with different conditions. What else? Setting an intention, just doing affirmations, right? Giving yourself the great, just giving yourself that self-love,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and doing different things that make you happy, right? I always say self-care is like food, right? We don't eat once a month, right? Like you need to eat every day, multiple times a day because your body needs it. You need to do the same thing with self-care. I also like engaging in a gratitude practice. I like to do a morning routine where I set an intention for the day, right? I pray, meditate, I exercise, and then I like to engage in some type of growth activity, like learning something. So,
Mm-hmm.
audiobook reading, you might want to read inspirational stories of people who are thriving with autoimmunity, just to kind
Mm-hmm.
of get you in that positive mental state. Because I
Yeah.
don't believe that, just because you have autoimmune disease does not mean you should be sitting in a corner and
Right.
and crying, right? Like, I mean, you might go through those moments, and I've been through those
Mm-hmm.
moments, but you don't need to stay there,
Right. Right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So you can find joy with autoimmunity.
Mm-hmm. And you can definitely live well for sure. You're
Yeah.
definitely showing us that. And it's interesting. I feel like for autoimmune conditions are sort of um, our signal. It signals when something's wrong, when something got disrupted. And so we get our symptoms when we haven't been resting well. In a way, it helps to reset and to be able to know to kind of put your mind in check, because sometimes when you're so busy, you're in your busy mode and you're not really paying attention, you're not really monitoring how you're eating as well, you're not really monitoring how you're self-caring as well, you're not really monitoring your sleep as well or your hydration. And autoimmune conditions will put you in check in a minute. Like,
Hmm. Hmm.
they will remind you that, girl, you need to sit all the way down for a minute, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and the goal is to have fewer and fewer of those alarming moments. And some things, you can't completely control, because for some people, if they get sick with even just a virus, it may trigger their autoimmune condition. For other people, if they just have an unexpected life crisis, it may, as a result of the stress of the life crisis, trigger their autoimmune condition. But for the far majority of the time, it really becomes a barometer as to how well we're doing when it comes to thriving in life in general. And so I like those techniques that you've given us that we can take away with us, to reset when we're in one of those life crisis moments or stressful or
Mhm.
stress related disorder moments, and hopefully doing them more preventively as opposed to in response to our dysregulation, so to speak. So thank you for that information. I will definitely be doing the 4, 7, and 8. I will be doing the box breathing. I have done the tapping. In fact, I just did the tapping last weekend with a group. So the tapping definitely works.
Very effective. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very effective. And all those techniques that you mentioned, I've heard them at some point or another. Haven't practiced them all, but they are definitely effective methods of de-stressing and sort of self-regulating. So if you were to give any final thoughts to anyone who's experiencing either symptoms where they're undergoing a diagnosis for an autoimmune condition or just recently diagnosed with one, as they sort of plan their life out, are there any things that they should consider doing?
Yes. So I would say one, give yourself grace, right? You want to give yourself grace as you're going through the diagnosis, as you're trying to adapt to this new life, right? This new life event. And then also you don't just remember that your body is battling this illness. So don't give your body try not to give your body anything else to battle. And what I mean is I do encourage people to eat the best food that they can, eat organic food if you can, because you don't want your body battling pesticides and GMOs and antibiotics when you're battling the disease, right? So you want to try to cultivate those healthy responses to stress because you don't want your body battling that while you're battling an autoimmune disease, right? And remember
I love
self.
that. That is 100%.
Yeah, no, no, yeah, thanks. Yeah, I've mentioned that like number of times in my book. Like, don't make your body do more work than it has to, right? So, try to do the minimum. And oh, one thing I didn't mention in terms of like stress, learn to say no. Okay? Learn to say no. Yeah, definitely learn to say no. You're going through this. Oh, and another thing is get the support that you need. Right. So, okay. So
Mm,
don't let your body go through, don't put more stress on it than it needs to. Give yourself grace, get the support that you need, and learn to say no. And I'll put a little plug in there. You did talk about my upcoming book. It will be very helpful for anyone with a chronic illness, with an autoimmune disease who's just been diagnosed. It's written for people with autoimmune diseases and
woohoo!
chronic illnesses. So go to cleanbodyliving.com/book and sign up, and then you'll get a notification when it's published.
Woohoo! That is, I'm so excited for that. I'm excited for you. I'm excited for us to be able to have access to information in that book because listen, what I want to do in 2025 is on my health, my healing, and my happiness. Okay.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
That's what I want to do. Okay. And I definitely want to thrive while I'm living with an autoimmune condition. So I definitely will be hopping into Clean Body Living website and make sure I sign up so I can get that notification, be one of the first to get it, and give somebody with it. Because oftentimes people don't want to take the extra step to really help themselves. But if you're part of their village, you can provide for them the information that they need by being an advocate and getting books like AmiCietta's book that's coming out. So that's another way in which you can help someone if you're not personally affected by autoimmune conditions. Given the numbers, everybody know not just one, but several people with autoimmune conditions. Okay, because it is
That's
that
true.
prevalent that likely if you don't know someone now, you certainly will know someone, if not several people throughout your lifetime who are living with autoimmune diseases. So it's an opportunity for you to be an advocate and for you to also be a part of their village as they take this journey through life. So that being said, I'm AmiCietta Clarke, extraordinaire health coach, international attorney, now author. Okay, let's talk
Yeah.
about it. And entrepreneur. Don't forget that part. Business owner, founder, the whole shebang.
Yes.
If they want to keep in contact with you, and definitely you mentioned how they can get access to the book to be the first people to get access to the book. But if they just want to follow your advice and recommendations, also in addition to reading the book, how will they be able to find you?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Moore, for having me. I really appreciate it. This has been a great conversation. So I'm on Instagram at Clean Body Living, on Facebook at Clean Body Living, and I'm on LinkedIn at AmiCietta Duche Clarke. But if you just look up AmiCietta, that my name is unique, you'll find me on LinkedIn.
I love it. I love it. And yes, I listen. This is such a great conversation. I thank you so much for coming on and sharing your personal journey with us. You shared your, for those who didn't see or hear about the initial experience of presentation of your diagnosis with myasthenia gravis, they need to go and we gonna link the previous video to this video so y'all gonna
Okay.
understand what that journey is like and how AmiCietta has changed her diet, her environment, as you hear, her mental health also, to be able to be on this side of her condition where she's thriving. So AmiCietta, I am so thankful to have you. You always have great advice. You always have very practical advice also, and very transparent about your experience living with myasthenia gravis. So definitely thank you for hanging out with us once more. And as always, I'm Dr. T, the hand behind the handle of Healthy Bump Club right here on YouTube and on Fanbase, because as you guys know, we support our own. And you can find us also at healthybump.club on Instagram. We thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to check out the prior episodes so you can get the backstory. And we hope to see y'all in the next episode. And
All right.
this is Dr. T. Just a friendly reminder. Don't forget to comment, like, and share. And go ahead. Why not? Click that subscribe button. Help us to get to the next 1,000 subscribers. We thank you guys for supporting.